Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. This segment is brought to you by Bull Realty. For custom asset and occupancy solutions, visit bullrealty.com. Today we're talking about sustainability. We're talking about wellness. My guest is Rex Hamre. He's Southeast Sustainability Director with JLL. And Rex, we were talking before about sustainability. I want to ask you a little bit more about wellness. And I'll start off by telling you that we do fresh flowers and plants and things in our office here. And it was interesting. I came in one morning and I just didn't feel as comfortable in here. And I didn't really understand why. Later in the afternoon, the flowers were delivered, they were put out, and then all of a sudden I felt better and I did not know why. And then it occurred to me, my surroundings, I have more nature around me, some beauty with the flowers. And, to me, I'm like, flowers? I don't care about flowers. Are some people benefiting from some of the sustainability factors around them and maybe not even realizing it?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Actually, wellness, which is really one of the most exciting new trends in sustainability and in commercial real estate in the built environment, a lot of those benefits might be seen as somewhat indirect to the individual. So, the quality of the lighting in the space, and that's something where you might, spend an 8 or 10 hour day working under those kind of old-fashioned fluorescent lights that we all used to deal with, versus when you're in a space that has a lot of natural light, nice big open windows, sunlight coming in. You feel better at the end of the day. You actually might, have an easier time going to sleep at night because you haven't kind of upset your circadian rhythm of what time is it when at nighttime I need to go to sleep and during the day I need to be awake and working. And so you see a lot of those benefits, and they've been measured in peer-reviewed studies. But it sometimes is hard to know for sure as the individual. It's like, oh, that's something that's really, affected me directly. Yeah, and we're in our office buildings a lot. And so obviously it's going to affect our productivity. But you also have an example that's of wellness factors that involves a hospital, right? Yeah, absolutely. So one of the interesting studies that we use as an example, especially when we're encouraging, for example, like the smart design of more access to views, more access to natural light, is there were 3 hospital rooms in the study. So one which didn't have any windows, one which had a television screen with an artificial view to the outside in nature, and one with an actual window where you looked out on green space. And it was on a spectrum of recovery, and the people who were in the room that had the artificial view still recovered faster than those without any window at all. But then the people who recovered most quickly were those that had a real window to the natural environment. We have an affinity towards being outside and being in nature as people. And like you said, we spend more than 90% of our time inside. And we kind of have this natural engagement with the outside, with nature. And so how we can kind of bring that into our, commercial offices and the places that we spend a lot of time, that's a real focus of our work.
Yeah, and now there's a wellness certification that you can get, and what are some of the items in a wellness certification? It's the light, it's the air we breathe. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of certifications out there, and maybe a lot of your listeners sometimes can get frustrated with, oh, there's another certification that I need to pay for. But like LEED certification that most people have heard of, that's a big part of the work that we do, is helping clients achieve LEED certification. So leadership in energy and environmental design, that's what LEED stands for. So as we transition to wellness being a real focus of the work we do, the first and arguably the most popular is the WELL building standard. And that isn't an acronym, it's just WELL for wellness. And that's really taken a lot of that peer-reviewed research and implemented it in a way that works in lots of different commercial properties. And then it's also worth mentioning there's a program developed by the Centers for Disease Control and the GSA called Fitwell. And the exciting thing about Fitwell is it's built to be very applicable across a lot of different property types, a lot of different types of buildings. As you might imagine, the GSA has all different kinds of buildings that they have to own and manage. and it's meant to be quite cost effective. So particularly, for example, for portfolios where you might want to say, I've got 100 buildings and there are a lot of different types, a lot of different vintages. You can assess and then implement a Fitwel certification program, and that implements a lot of those. Okay, what can we do to improve access to natural light? What can we do to improve our HVAC systems for better filtration? What can we do to improve, food selection decisions on site, or their access to fitness classes that might be on site or nearby? All of those things, basically creating a framework for us to improve the wellness of our built environment.
Yeah, it's a great subject, and I'd like to see more of our corporate users and our landlords involved. And one of the things that's part of the wellness certification are like plants right around us that provide us more oxygen and bring us back really to more nature, right? How do you handle that if you're talking to a CFO and there may be someone that's real numbers oriented and you say, look, I think we should have a plant wall here. And they say, well, where's my return on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of the time we're working for corporate real estate or for occupiers or for investors that are focused on the real estate. And so the first thing we do is we might often in that meeting talking about sustainability and financial investments, we may see the corporate real estate director and the CFO, like you talked about. And when you open up wellness, one of the first things that I do is I say, okay, when we have this discussion, it'd be really great if your HR director could actually come with and attend the meeting. And so first of all, that's kind of like breaking down those walls of let's make corporate real estate kind of like a real strategic value proposition for the goals of the HR team. Right. And because a lot of those values and a lot of that financial return of wellness is actually kind of housed in the costs that HR, overhead, the people costs of a business. And so they become somewhat indirect in the sense that, well, that's not going back to the direct real estate budgets that we have to manage. But when you look at, say, if you have the average operating cost of $3 per square foot and the average real estate cost of $30 a square foot, but then the average people costs of $300 a square foot, a 1% savings over in the overhead can totally cover all of those operating expense savings that we're realizing from some of our traditional sustainability investments. So that's a lot of the part of that kind of introductory conversation of, let's bring the people to the table who are really going to value this specifically, and to make it a holistic analysis of how we're going to achieve, kind of direct profits as well as indirect profits from these sustainability initiatives. And
that's awesome. And getting HR involved, because real estate is about the people. It's a place for people, right? And if we can increase the productivity, like you said, maybe 1% or 3%, that could be huge for a company. And then you think about the cost of turnover. I mean, that's a huge cost for companies. And if you can have people healthier, more productive, you're going to have less turnover, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So, attraction and retention of talent is a real focus for a lot of big companies, and I think probably small companies as well. And so, it costs a lot of money to attract a new employee to a company. And so being able to keep them is, in particular, very valuable. And so when we talk about, having a workplace where someone wants to go, where they feel like they're valued, where they feel like what they're doing matters, and where they feel like they're kind of being treated well, that is something that is really valuable for a lot of large companies. And so when we basically try to take those ideas and turn them into actionable strategies around the workplace and around the built environment. So, if you have some of the obvious ones, if you have a much better fitness center in your building versus your competitive set, that's going to be something that really matters to the people in the space. If I didn't work here, I'd have to spend another $100 a month to go to this gym, but this is something, it's kind of both a direct and indirect value to those employees. Yeah. All the way down to, we talked about some of those things that you might not even exactly be able to identify, but when you get done at the end of the day at a facility, at a building that really kind of encourages your wellness, has the natural environment, has brought nature into the space, has higher quality lighting and cleaner air, then you kind of have that indirect benefit at the end of the year. You say, I just kind of feel good about everything I'm doing, so why would I leave?
Yeah. And how many corporate users of space out there do you think that don't understand? I mean, it seems like most of them do, but when it comes to the wellness, and you come to them and say, well, here's the wellness. If you want the wellness certification, we've got to do this, this, and this, and it's going to cost this. What kind of, do you get any kickback? Do you get, what do they say to you? I mean,
well, that is a great question. I spend a lot of my career getting kickback, at least initially, from clients or potential clients. Maybe they've hired us to manage the overall development of their new commercial office building or their new world headquarters. That's something that we as in JLL Project and Development Services, that's what we do, our bread and butter every day. And so I come in and introduce the idea around sustainability and employee health and wellness. It's very normal to have an initial reaction of, are you just trying to sell me something else? Or, why does this really matter? And it's about setting up that explanation and that education around, these are the direct financial values of implementing these type of initiatives. And then particularly with wellness, like we talked about, who needs to have a seat at the table to talk about why that's valuable. And also, for a lot of your listeners, this is something that is quite new. So if you've never heard of the Well Building Standard, or if something around, even health and wellness in the workplace sounds quite new, that's okay. This is something that has become a fast-growing trend in the marketplace, but is going to continue to evolve over the next several years.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. I think it's not okay. I think if you're in commercial real estate, especially if you work anywhere with users in their space, and it's ready to office space, I think it's huge, and it's very, very important. And I think this is all about the people and the productivity, and you've got to think about it. So, what else should our listeners think about related to sustainability or wellness before you have to leave us and get back to helping folks? And by the way, if you need services like Rex does at JLL, you work with anybody, make sure you deal with Rex, and make sure you're probably, in my mind, the most important person, because if you're a corporate user and you're building a headquarters, you really need it to be right for the people. And if you can incorporate the wellness, you can incorporate the sustainability that really attracts people who want to be there. They want to stay. We all read the studies about employees, and it almost surprises us as CEOs sometimes that money's not the most important thing. It's really the environment and the people and the culture and how they feel. We spend a lot of time working in our offices, so we need to think about it more. So help us. Help my listeners understand the importance of all this, and at the end of the day, find the return.
Well, that covers a lot of different areas, and as an example, one of the things that's exciting to me is when we get involved very early with our clients. Like you said, it'd be exciting if us sustainability leaders got to be the first people at the table when we're talking about major real estate projects. But getting involved even in the context of site selection for projects, maybe not driving a client to a certain city, but in the context of here's the 3 sites that our real estate team has identified that's valuable, and actually looking at it from the perspective of, okay, well, how cost effective is it going to be to deliver a sustainable building on this site? How much more walkable is one site than another? Looking at it all the way from the beginning perspective of, what are the sustainability and wellness outcomes that are possible in a given location? That's something that gets really exciting. All the way down to then when we talk about some of our cutting edge clients, looking at the context of, what's the embodied carbon of our real estate project? So, we've talked a lot about energy efficiency, water efficiency, what's the kind of output of these facilities and how that's important to the environment. Now with our most cutting edge clients, we're actually looking at, what's the embodied content of the environmental impact of the materials that actually make the building itself. And that's something that, so we got to looking at things even more holistically around the sustainability environmental footprint.
Yeah, and you think about it, it's like when you get a new car, right? And people say, "Oh, I love that new car smell." Well, you're really smelling things that's not good for you, right?
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely true. And that's a great, the automobiles are a great example where, you have the embodied energy it takes, and so the carbon footprint of actually producing that automobile to comparing to, well, its lifetime on the road and how much energy it uses. And that's actually something where, there's a lot of misinformation around, electric cars, because they're so much more efficient, have so much lower impact, particularly if they're able to charge in a place where there's a renewable energy, they have a lower overall footprint than an average gasoline vehicle. Mm-hmm. So that's a good way to look at it. And thinking about buildings in the context of looking at both of those things, like what does it take us to produce this building? And reusing buildings becomes much more valuable. Repurposing buildings, because we don't have to bring in a bunch of new materials, and so that it's already there. And as well as then looking at the long-term life cycle of the building and trying to reduce that impact.
Yeah. So Rex, what would you leave our audience with if they have an existing building, existing space, maybe 2 or 3 more easy button things to think about for either sustainability or wellness?
Yeah. So if I had to pick 3 things, so the first would be, if you're looking at upgrading your lighting, and maybe that's something that you're already looking at the energy efficiency, because it's quite popular to have energy efficient lighting improvement. You're going from fluorescents to LEDs. Also take a look at it from a health and wellness perspective. What's the quality of the lighting? Is there color temperature, improvements that we can make? The controllability of the lighting, so people can maybe change the lighting levels to better suit their preferences. And that kind of factoring that in, not just from an efficiency perspective, but also from a wellness perspective. The second one would probably be air quality. Really looking at, even as a tenant, when you're signing a new lease, or even if you're an existing tenant in a building, saying, what filtration are you using on our HVAC system? Can we upgrade that? Can we improve it? Maybe even doing air quality testing and identifying if there's any areas where you might find improvement. We see a lot of real benefits. A, there's a lot of research around improved air quality, and B, that that's something that really has a beneficial impact to your space.
Now, how do I test my air? Can I bring in my hound dog and have him sniff around?
Well, that's certainly a way to do it, for sure. You might identify some really interesting things in your space when you have, when you bring something like that into the space. But there's a couple of different ways. There are testing companies that come in with what looks like fancy equipment and do the testing. There's even things as simple as a company will ship you canisters, and you open the canisters up for a certain amount of time, and they collect the air in that canister. You seal them up and ship them back, and then they come back and let you know, are there volatile organic compounds in the space? Are there any issues with the air quality? So it's a relatively painless, relatively simple process. And so if I had to pick a third, then it would probably be something like you talked about of, can we bring the natural elements into the space? We talk a lot about sustainability in the core of efficiency and environmental impact reduction, but just sort of, dipping your toe into what's kind of the wellness benefits that we can work into our offices and our places.
Yeah, those are great tips. And if you took a tour of our office here in Atlanta, our corporate office here, there's a lot of plants. And we have a plant lady who comes around, and I get to see the plant lady who takes care of them. And I asked her today when she was here, because she came in and took care of a couple plants at my office, and I said, did you tell them a little story? Were you nice to them? But it can really make a big difference. Final question on the air quality. Testing it, probably not that hard to do, that expensive. What about improving the air quality? Might that be an expensive thing to do for a building with some age on it?
It can depend, and there can be some investments that are required. But the first thing is that just improving filtration, at the air handler unit in the central systems is often relatively simple, and can be really valuable. That's actually an example where there's a give and take around. Extra filtration actually costs a little bit more energy because the fans have to push that air through higher performance filters. But there's a real benefit. This is that focus on the indoor environmental quality for the people being the most valuable asset in that space. And then expanding upon that, then it's also about okay, what's coming into our space? Because a lot of the time what we find is so the paint products might be, we have a policy in our building about zero VOC paints, but when you're doing a small renovation, maybe that wasn't followed, and identifying of saying, okay, actually our procurement process might need to change a little bit because we need to be a little more careful about what's actually coming into our offices in order to make sure we maintain that high quality. So those two things, a little bit of the focus on filtration improvement, and then also looking at what is coming in that's kind of affecting some of those testing results.
Okay. Said final question, one quick one, maybe more fun. Plastic straws in your office? Y'all have plastic straws?
We don't have plastic straws in our office. Yeah, and a lot of our clients, reusable cups like you have. That's really that's
styrofoam
really
cups
important.
either?
No styrofoam cups. That's a great question. But I actually want to expand on that to say, whether straws are kind of the key to our solution for sustainability. That's clearly they're a valuable part of kind of starting that conversation of how can we reduce waste, opening up the door of okay, what is our embodied impact of all of these things that we're doing. And so I see that as kind of a valuable conversation starter. Does fixing the straw problem fix all of our issues? No, but it really kind of opens that door towards looking holistically around sustainability and wellness in our workplaces.
Right, and we need to think about it, and I don't know what the fascination with straws, understand the fascination. Anyway, but Rex, great information, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Michael.
And thank you for joining us around the world or around the country, however you listen or watch the show. We appreciate it. And thanks for commenting. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for connecting with us on your favorite social media. Until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh. And join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Bull Realty. For customized asset and occupancy solutions, visit bullrealty.com. Commercial Agent Success Strategies. Incredible training for commercial agents. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com.